Hi guys, thank you for taking the time to watch this video. So it's Saturday, May 2nd, and basically what I've just done, if you've turned in your essays that are due this weekend, I've gone and just kind of looked at the introduction, looked a little bit at the body paragraphs. I didn't go in depth with them because we're going to be meeting in a Google chat later this week to go over each one of them. So we'll be able to talk about it more in details then, but I did comment on a lot of them. I noticed that there's a lot of things that we went over that weren't included in a lot of them. If you missed our video chat last week, I think you'll find this video very helpful because it's going to go over this DBQ direction sheet that I created with some super helpful information and really some like almost cheat-worthy tips of how to get every point possible out of this essay. So whether you attended that meet or not last week, here's something you can repeat, you can stop it, you can go back and forth, you can listen to me repeat the same thing over and over again, and so forth. But I created this video because I think understanding this sheet that I made is going to help you a lot to get every possible point that you can out of the exam coming up in a couple weeks. So one of the essays that we have written earlier this year was explain whether the 30 Years' War was fought primarily for religious or primarily for religious reasons. So each question you get will fall under one of these three categories. It will ask you to compare two different things. It will ask you how something has changed or continued over time, or it will be a causation essay. It'll ask you about the causes of something. This one, hopefully if you take a second, explain whether the 30 Years' War was fought primarily for religious or political reasons. Hopefully you can realize that it's asking you why the 30 Years' War was fought. So that would be causation essay. So you have to decide, was this fought primarily for religious or for political reasons? That's going to be your thesis that you respond to with that. Some things to keep in mind. What time period are you in? The 30 Years' War takes place from 1618 to 1648, so obviously we're within that time period. And are you directly answering the question that's being asked? A lot of times people write these great essays, like beautifully written, explain things so well, but if you're not answering the exact question that they're asking you in the 45 minutes that you get this year, you're not going to get the most possible points that you can. So we're going to focus on the introduction. As we've talked about all year, I want you to be able to leave the introduction with 2 points already completed and done. The first one being the context or the background information, the causes behind something. Generally, this should be about 4 to 5 full sentences explaining the background information or causes of the events being asked about. You want to be probably no more than 100 years really before what's going on, but you do want to go back far enough that you're explaining like I said, the background information, the causes for what's going on. If more than one event, like the Glorious Revolution and Enlightenment era essay that you are currently writing or just wrote, do your best to contextualize both of them with a focus on the main topic, which would have been the Glorious Revolution in this one. Be specific with context, like you should have 2 or 3 specific terms, events, people, inventions, something, and then use it to connect to your argument. You have to make sure the context that you're giving is relevant to the argument. This is talking about the 30 Years' War, primarily fought for religious or political reasons. If you're talking about the Renaissance here, I'm sure there's connections that can be made, but there's definitely better ones. Age of Exploration, again, there's probably some things you can tie in, but the things you should be focused on here are the wars of the Reformation that happened before, on the Peace of Augsburg and how that's set up, and then about what is actually going to cause the 30 Years' War. So making sure your context is long enough, that it's specific enough, and that it's actually relevant to the prompt and the question, the time period that they're asking you. Just because you're writing about something that happened before the time period took place doesn't mean it's good contextualization. It has to be related to whatever you're talking about. If you don't do a good job with this in the introduction, you can also sprinkle it throughout your essay, but it's my advice, get this right off, set the tone, set the background information of the topics that you're going to be talking about, get it done in the introduction. That leads us to the most important part of the essay, in my opinion, the thesis. Should be 1 to 2 sentences in the introduction after the context that wraps up your introduction. You need to directly answer the question with a specific line of reasoning. Your line of reasoning is what, again, specific evidence you will use in your body paragraphs. If you don't love your thesis in the introduction and you don't want to go back and take the time to fix that one, You can put it in your conclusion, but I think that's a little bit of a waste of time because there's no need to write it twice in here. Uh, Take the extra minute or what you need to make sure your thesis is 100% sound, because your whole DBQ is going to be coming back to this thesis, and you want to make sure that you're connecting it to something relevant, something insightful. So I stole this. There's other history teachers that have YouTube segments, and I love this one. I can't remember the Heimler history, I believe is what it is, but I came across this and it's wonderful. This is the guide to writing a perfect thesis that also sets up your complex understanding point. So use this little formula here when you go to write your thesis. So although X, because A and B, therefore Y. Now obviously that doesn't make any sense without knowing what the key to that is. So X is your counter argument. There's going to be, like for this essay that we said, the 30 Years' War, if you think it was fought primarily for political reasons, the religious reasons would be the counterpoint. Remember, we talked about how acknowledging both sides of an argument can earn you that complex understanding point. This is where you want to introduce it to start that complexity to your essay. A and B are specific evidence that you're going to use in your essay to actually back up your thesis, and making sure that you actually have the argument. So again, explain whether the 30 Years' War was fought primarily for religious or primarily for political reasons. We said this is a causation essay caused by political or religious reasons. So the question is simple. Is it religious or is it political? Unfortunately, you can't just say it's religious and then go on. You have to word it a certain way. So this is how we use this guide, this formula to write it, that makes it so you can get the complex understanding point and also introduce the evidence you're going to use. So, although the 30 Years' War began as a religious conflict, because of Sweden's desire for more territory around the Baltic Sea and France's motivations to weaken the Holy Roman Empire, the war took on a political tone. Therefore, the 30 Years' War was fought primarily for political reasons. So, although it began as a religious conflict, so that's me acknowledging the counterpoint right there. I'm saying that, okay, it did start as a religious conflict, but because of Sweden's desire for more territory, that's not religious, and France's motivations to weaken the Holy Roman Empire, that's not religious. Both of those are political. The war took on a political tone. Therefore, my claim, the 30 Years' War was fought primarily for political reasons. So again, acknowledge the counterpoint, bring up specific evidence as to why your thesis is correct, and make sure that your thesis and claim is, straight to the point. It doesn't need to be too wordy. I think following this formula is the perfect way to doing well on this. And remember, you can have it in front of you when you're writing this year. So I would print this out and have it in front of you to begin, and making sure you're filling in the X, A, B, and Y. If you need more help with that, just ask. So body paragraphs. Before you start writing, it's important to realize the documents can be grouped together. For this one, it's very simple. Not all the documents that you're going to get in this 5-document essay are going to argue in the same direction. You can argue either side of the argument. That's why it's an argument. It's whatever one you want to do. So for this one, very clearly, some of the documents are going to be religious. Some are going to be political for this specific prompt. Reasons that it was fought over religion should be grouped together, and political documents should be grouped together. Each of these paragraphs should be tied together with their own topic sentence. So here's an example of just the religious. The 30 Years' War was a conflict over religion. Began as a conflict over religion, because remember, that's relating back to my thesis. You would then go on and explain explain how the documents show that, what are the contents of the document, and then connect it to your argument. And do any sourcing or outside information that you can include in those. This can be included in any part of the essay where it makes sense to, but obviously the body paragraphs make the most sense for that. And remember, the outside information has to be relevant. You have to show why the purpose, whatever is relevant to, but we'll get to those points later on. Political example of a topic sentence. After I'm done going through all of the documents that talk about religion and showing how it began as a religious conflict, and remember, connecting them to my argument, I would separate another paragraph, and now I'm going to talk about the political example. Later, the religious motives of the 30 Years' War were replaced by political motives for the war. And then in this paragraph, I would go through and I would talk about all of the political documents. I would explain the contents, summarize it in 1 to 2 sentences. What is the document saying? And then connect it to your argument. The word I love to throw in there is therefore. Here is what the document is saying. Therefore, now you need to explain that information that you just used and how it helps your argument. The biggest mistake I see people do is they explain the document and then they just say, this clearly shows that it was fought for political reasons or religious reasons. You're not really saying anything. You're making the reader make those connections. You're the one that has to make those connections. Explain it straight out, how the information from the documents you're providing helps your argument, continues your argument. So make sure every time you do that, you're connecting it to an argument. Explain why that piece of evidence is the cause or whatever else the document's asking you to do. It might be changed over time or continued, or like I said, any of the 3 types of essays it can be. Explain that document, 1 to 2 sentences, probably 2 for most of you because we tend to be a little short. Make sure you're fully explaining that document like someone hasn't read it before, but not taking too much time to waste it all on that. Then connect it to your argument. Make sure you argue, therefore, this information, and then explain to the grader why that supports the argument that you're making in this DBQ. And again, any sourcing or outside information you need to do fits in the body paragraphs. But if you're using political reasons, then obviously that should be in the political paragraph. If you're using religious reasons, obviously it should be in the religious paragraph. Now remember, it's not going to be political or religious probably on your exam. It'll be the difference between whatever things they're asking you or the causes or comparing 2 things. But it's important that you still group your documents, figure out what 2 sides there are, and group those documents into the body paragraphs based on that, and make sure you have a simple topic sentence introducing what that paragraph is going to be discussing. What is that specific paragraph that you're writing? What part of the argument are you arguing there? So please don't just jump in to a paragraph and say, in document 1, make sure that you are giving a topic sentence overviewing what is there. Extra advice, we just said this, group the documents together into body paragraphs. Do not separate a body paragraph for each document. You should group the documents together. That shows the person grading it that you understand how the documents fit together and work to connect your argument. Do not quote the documents. It wastes time and it earns you no points. One of the points you earn on this is for describing at least 2 documents. Remember 4 to get the extra points. But when you describe those 4 documents and connect them to your essay, it doesn't help to quote. Quoting gets you no point. The person grading it knows what the quote says. It's important for you to describe it in your own words what the document is saying to make sure you earn that point. So again, I'm saying do not quote. I would limit yourself to 10, 12 minutes going through the documents. I wouldn't have some big extensive organizer, but I would have something that works for me. We've gone over a bunch of examples, so you can just say, okay, document 1, I'm going to summarize it by talking about these main points. I'm going to use the purpose as this, and then going on. The more time you spend on the documents, the less time you're going to have to write the essay. Now, you need to have a full understanding of them so you can describe them, use them for your argument, and source them properly. But remember, yeah, you might become an expert on the documents, but if it takes you 20 minutes, then you only have 25 minutes left to write your essay. So it's important. Get the main points of it to describe it, how you're going to connect it to your essay, and is there any outside information you can use that you know about it, and is there any sourcing, the purpose, historical situation, audience, or point of view that you want to mention there. Have the rubric that we've gone over in this sheet printed out in front of you if possible. Remember, you want to have some type of notes because they're saying you can use notes on this exam. Do not use Google. Google is going to either get your exam invalidated for cheating, it's going to take too much time, you're going to plagiarize. Do not do that. Study before the exam so you know the content, so you don't have to waste time looking it up and that you already kind of know it. So again, do not use Google. Have the rubric, have this sheet with your thesis formula on it, and have, like I said, some type of study guide in front of you. Do not try to use the internet or another person, or it will invalidate your score. So this is covered so far basically how to structure your essay, like what the question is going to be like, how to write your context, a guide example of how to write your thesis, and how to group the documents together, use a topic sentence for each of the body paragraphs. The next video is going to go into how to actually use the evidence from the documents towards your argument and outside information and finishing up your essay. Please watch that as well.